Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our Data Governance webinar series. Today is the second part in our 5-part series, and we'll be focusing on visibility. I'm Rebecca Ellis, and I'll be the moderator for this morning. During today's presentation, we encourage you to send us your questions on the topic, and we'll answer them sequentially at the end. We have a lot of information to share with you today, so to that effect, I'd like to introduce you to Kathleen Casey, who is an implementation engineer at Sphere Technology Solutions. Her primary focus is everything Sphereboard, where she works to deploy Sphereboard to customers, customizes the solution around their needs, helps develop analytics for Sphere Engine and the business intelligence analytics for customers, which helps secure data and decrease their risks. Additionally, Kathleen is an adrenaline junkie, and she loves to skydive, travel, hike, and much more, and she'll be leading today's demo. So welcome, Kathleen, and now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Becky, and I'm really enjoying that picture. Awesome choice. And welcome, everybody, to our second webinar in our data governance series. I just want to covering in this webinar series. So last webinar, we talked about visibility and more specifically, what exactly you have in your environment as a whole, and how we determine those analytics. Today, we'll be discussing more in depth with what your security issues actually are, risks that they pose in your environment. The next is policies and process. You beef up some of your company's current policies and procedures and add any new ones to fill in the gaps. After that, we'll talk about remediation. This is where we go in and we fix those security issues and start to implement those policies and procedures that we had previously created. After that, we then automate. This is where we reduce human error and make those policies and procedures quick, easy, and reliable. So let's now dive into the second part of our visibility section, which is what are my security issues? So let's dig a little deeper and talk about specifically what security issues there are in access. This is all about numbers. This identifies the amount of people who have access in your environment. Open access is basically what it is. It's open. Everybody in your environment has access to a specific folder, a share, and then excessive access is a certain threshold that we implement, and anything above that we consider excessive. This threshold is determined based off of your, based on how big your company is and what you as your company would consider excessive. Excessive access is hard to find because we actually have to enumerate the number of people that have access in your environment. Next is inappropriate and non-standard. This focuses mostly on how someone has access and the type of access that they have. Inappropriate would be someone gaining access outside of normal standards, and non-standard is groups that have full control, users that are permissioned directly, or users that have full control. So after we've found those security issues, the next step is determining risk rating, or as I would like to call it, the shame game. This is where we prioritize and compare the different risks in your environment. We determine where in your company you're most at risk, and we categorize off of those numbers. This way, you're able to target those high-risk areas. With this, you're able to focus your efforts and reduce certain high-risk areas quickly because you know exactly where you are. And then with risk rating, we then move into history and trending. This is where we can track remediation efforts and can determine if efforts have slowed down and where you need to push in order to accomplish your goals. We can also forecast what's going on with your environment. With our advanced analytics, we're able to predict if you're heading in the right direction. And if you're not heading in the right direction, it gives you the ability to take action before things get a little out of hand. So now that I've kind of talked about how we determine security issues and what we do with those security issues, let's figure out how we determine this information in your environment. So we have at Sphere, we go and we take information from multiple different data sources. Some examples are SharePoint and Exchange, an HR system, any file shares, NetApps, anything where you have data, we'll go out and use our Sphere connectors to collect this data. We can actually also use third-party tools. One of our partners, Varonis, we use, and we collect the data that they have and we bring it back into our Sphere Engine. Once we have that data in Sphere Engine, we do some business intelligence where we analyze and correlate your data using our advanced analytics to determine those security issues, that risk rating, and then history and trending as well. So once we have all of that information in our database Sphere Engine, we then push it out to our extremely user-friendly front-end software called Sphereboard. This is where we show you all of the analytics going on in your environment, that basic inventory that I talked previously about in the other webinars, and those security issues that you have in your environment. So now that I've introduced you a little bit to what Sphereboard is and the analytics that it shows, let's talk about the structure of Sphereboard. So Sphereboard can be broken down into different tiers. So right now I'm going to talk about 3 tiers, but depending on how you structured your own company, these tiers can shift and you can add or you can remove tiers. So first we have our global level. This is what I like to call our executive level. It's a really high level analytics of basically what's going on in your environment. You've got your inventory, your security issues, and then those risk ratings. Next, we have our management level or regional view. This dives a little bit deeper into a specific area in your environment where, again, you'll see those inventory, those basic inventory stats, your security issues, and the risk ratings going on in that region. The last view, our details view, or I like to think of it as our engineer view, is it's a very detailed page that outlines specifically where in your environment you have issues. So engineers can go in here, find a share or a collection that has a high risk rating or a lot of security issues, see the share and know exactly where they have to remediate. So now that I've talked about the structure of Sphereboard, let's dive into a demo and where I'll talk and show you exactly what Sphereboard looks like. So today I'm going to cover our governance of files and folders modules, but we have a wide range of modules that we use our advanced analytics to determine different security issues going on with different structures in your environment. So now let's dive deep into our governance of files and folders. You may hear me refer to it as our GFS module. So Sphereboard is driven off of ownership. So the information that you see here is based off of an owner and where they lie in your environment. So our first 2 cards are our inventory card. You have your global stats, which gives you a high-level view of your overall environment. And then you have the inventory card that shows you the inventory through different regions. So this webinar is all about security, so let's dive into it. This is our security card. This is where we show you the security issues going on in your environment and how much security issues you have in different regions. The great thing about this card is you can see here you have a whole bunch of different security issues, but if you're focused on just one security issue, you can hide all of the other columns, so you see just the ones that you want to focus on. So here we have open access. This is where you can see how much open access you have in your environment. And great thing about all of our cards is that you can export them if you need to see a screenshot, so you can add it to a PowerPoint or a presentation, as well as our question mark, which lets you know what's going on if you have any questions about what this card specifically is. Another great thing about our security card is our history and trending module. This is where you see how you're doing in your environment, and as you would remediate, this red trend line here would turn down and would actually turn green, so you visually can see that you're heading in the right direction. And this can also be seen for different security issues. So this is a really great visual representation of how well you're doing in your environment with remediations, or it lets you know if you need to start acting on some security issues right away. The next card that I want to show is our sensitive data card. I talked a little bit about this card in our last demo, but what I really want to point out right now is that you see this red line. This line lets you know that you have that 40% of your sensitive data, some sort of security issue going on with these sensitive folders and files. Vulnerable and most at risk. And a great thing, again, about this card is you can sort and look at specific information or hide other things as well. So it's very interactive, and you're able to see exactly what you want to look at. And again, you have that question mark and can export this card. So now I want to dive deeper into our security card. So you can see how we break down each security issues in that regional view. So here we have open access. The great thing about this card is it shows you the percent across your this entire region, but it also gives you those top 10 business units with open access. And if you click on this view details, it kind of brings a snapshot of that detailed card and shows you exactly where you have security issues in these departments. And the same thing with inappropriate access. It's just a one way of showing the inappropriate access within your environment. Again, with these cards, you have the option to click on a question mark. So if you're not really sure what open access is, you can click here and read it on the side. You also have the ability to export these cards. So I want to show you this non-standard card. It's just another way of showing how we can show the data in your environment. This one is a graph, a bar graph, and it just shows you the instances of non-standard access in your environment. And again, you have the ability to add some folder counts in there to show the ratio of instances of non-standard access to actually the total folder count in that business unit. And then the last is that excessive access card. And again, it shows you that pie chart with the top 10 business units with excessive access. So now let's dive deeper into our details view, that third level. Here we'll click in, and this brings you to that detailed page, or the engineer view. This is where we can show you different shares and then their proposed owner, so who we found the owner for based off of our automated approach to ownership, and then all of the other security issues that we have and that risk rating for these specific shares. Now, the great thing about this is you can actually hide and unhide certain columns. So if we want to look at some non-standard access, we can see here that we have some direct users permission to some shares, as well as some users with full control. So this details card is great because it gives you some really good analytics around what's going on in your environment. Again, we have that option to export the data in many different formats, so it's great. Another thing that's helpful with Spearboard is what we call our breadcrumb path. This is where you can see exactly where you are. So we're in our GFF module in New York Security Information, specifically in human resources. So no matter where you're going, you can always go back and you know exactly how you've gotten there. So now let's take a step back because I really want to dive deeper into that second level of our sensitive data card, because again, it just shows you more in depth of the information and the risks that are going on in your environment. So we now dove deeper into our sensitive data card, and we now see the departments within New York that have some sensitive data and it really shows that unsecured sensitive data. So if we look here, we can see that fixed income has about 81% of their sensitive data is unsecured. So this lets you know that you really need to go talk to those proposed owners in fixed income and kind of ask what's going on and remediate those efforts right away. And then again, you have the ability to export this card and click on this question mark if you're not really sure what you're looking at. So now I want to talk about risk rating. Risk rating is the third card, and this is one of my favorite cards because it does kind of do the shame game. For this risk rating card, we've done a basic just algorithm that shows you a number view of what's going on in your environment. So here it's on a scale of 1 to 100, and we can see that APAC has a high risk rating, so you might want to tackle APAC first. And then another area that's pretty high is New York. So we can click into New York, and it brings us to that details page where we see those high-level details with the proposed owners and those security issues. And the great thing about this details page is that you can search for specific shares, specific words in shares, or a specific proposed owner. And you can see here that compliance has a risk rating of about 100%. And this for you might be kind of questionable because it's a compliance share. They should be compliant, their risk rating shouldn't be so high. So you may want to go to this proposed owner and kind of figure out what's happening. So I kind of really want to show you where we're heading with risk rating. So I'm going to jump back to our PowerPoint slide so I can show you the cool things that we have going on with risk rating. This is our heat map. This is our multi-dimensional look into your environment. This is our new way of showing what's going on in your environment. This card is currently on some of our modules, but will soon be on all of them. It's great because it takes multiple different areas and information in your environment and lets you know exactly where that risk is and why is it so risky. So this is just a little preview into what's to come in Sphereboard. So make sure that you keep looking in at our webinars and keep joining so you can see all of the advancements that we're making around different analytics. So that concludes my demo of Sphereboard. I'm going to now hand it over to Caitlin, who's going to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Caitlin Signorella, an account manager at Sphere Technology Solutions. Like she said, I'm just going to take a couple minutes and tell you a bit about who we are and what we do. So at a high level, Sphere Technology Solutions is a cybersecurity company that focuses on insider threats as it relates to data, identities, and enterprise assets. Where most security companies focus on securing your endpoints and perimeter, we assist from the inside out. If I can direct your attention, first are our services, where our engineers get to know your business and unique security concerns, roll up their sleeves, and solve problems ranging from governance to compliance. Next, we have our CISO advisory services, where we assist from an executive level. Everything from risk assessments to a roadmap for compliance for any of the well-known regulations we've all heard of and have to abide by. Finally, we have Sphereboard, where plenty of tools can go and look for sensitive data and classify it. We take it a step further and figure out where that sensitive data is vulnerable. Like Kathleen said, our solution brings in data from several different sources and provides an automated dashboard of customized visualizations and key risk indicators. In addition to our own solution, we've partnered with the best of breed and third-party vendors, Varonis, Quest, SailPoint, Splunk, and ServiceNow. I'm sure you've heard of a few. Now, I'm just going to take a minute to dig into a few areas that we focus on specifically. First and foremost, we have unstructured data that lives in your data, systems, and assets, things like your public folders or SharePoint. We find sensitive data at risk and help to remediate those vulnerabilities. Then, we have identity and access management, where we determine your sensitive data, whether or not they should have access, and help to implement best practices around those roles. The natural next step is privileged access management, where we can assist in identifying who has those godlike administrative powers, how they're using that access, and whether or not they should have that level of privilege. Our three main motivating factors for the majority of our engagements are governance, security, and compliance. So whether we're providing visibility and assisting in developing policies and procedures, remediating risk, or automating those processes, SPHERE helps to identify your specific pain points and priorities to bring you closer to a clean environment and that desired end state. Now I'm going to pass this back over to Rebecca for questions.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Kathleen, for the presentation. Now we'll move on to answering questions you've sent in. So the first one we've received is, how do you automate determining ownership?
Great question. So we use what we call our waterfall approach of determining ownership. It's a process that we use where we look at different information in your environment, as well as any ownership information that you have, and we apply ownership based off this waterfall approach. So we'll take the most authoritative source first, so whether that's ownership that you found in your company, or if you have information in a managed by field of a group or anything like that, we'll use the most authoritative source first. Then we'll dive down and look at, who's most active. So who's using this information the most? So maybe they should be the owner of this specific share because they're the ones that are using it the most. We'll also take a look at permission data. So who's permissioned to a folder, and have some criteria based around that information. We can also, the great thing for us is because it's an automated approach, that we can take a look at someone's job title. If they're too senior, we can exclude them from being an owner, or if they're too junior, we can also exclude them. Another great thing that we do is we can look at if they're an actual employee of the company or a consultant. You typically don't want a consultant to be the owner of a share because they're not going to be there for a long time. They're only there for a certain amount of time, so they shouldn't be the owner. So that's just a few ways that we automate ownership.
Thank you. And the second question for you, I have a specific criteria that defines inappropriate access. Can that be built into the tool?
Of course. So we use inappropriate access, and we determine it multiple ways. We have our own standards that we incorporate. We take business best practice standards, as well as any standards that you have as a company. We pull that information into our SPHERE engine and then do our advanced analytics to determine where you have inappropriate access. For example, some of our clients use a ticketing system where if someone needs access to something, they fill out a ticket, that ticket's reviewed. Once that ticket's reviewed and accepted, they then get permission to that resource. We'll take this into account, and we'll look at all of the people permissioned to a share or a member of a group, and we'll compare that to this ticketing system and the information in this ticketing system. And if a user got access to that file share or that group without going through the proper channels, we'll mark that as inappropriate access, so that you know that you need to review how this user got access to this information.
Okay, thank you. And the last question we've received is, can risk rating be adjusted for other things such as location of users?
Of course. We can definitely take that into account. For example, if your hub or the main location of your company, let's say, is New York City, when we determine security issues and proposed ownership, we can also take a look at the location of not only the proposed owner, but the users that are permissioned into these file shares. And if for whatever reason you want to make something of where a majority of the users are from New York a little bit, have a higher risk rating, we'll just adjust our analytics to account for that. What we can also do is, for whatever reason, if you only want to make sure that a share or your environment, the proposed owner is in one location, and then all of those users are also in that same location, if they're for whatever reason someone got access to that share and is in a different location, we can mark that as being risky, so that'll show up in your risk rating. So we definitely can take into consideration the location of individuals and users when determining risk rating.
Okay, thank you. A replay of this webinar will be posted on our website at www.spherecode.com. Thank you all very much for joining, and I hope you have a good day.